Do you need the Congress to act?
Well, David, thanks for having me. And I think it certainly would be helpful for Congress to act to decide where they want jurisdiction for crypto to lie. Now, I think over time, crypto is not going to be housed in one regulatory agency, but certainly to give us some parameters of where they think the primary regulatory authority should lie, that would be very helpful right now.
So I'm curious from the SEC's point of view, there's a debate going on in the United States and particularly up on Capitol Hill. What's the use case at this point for cryptocurrency? We've seen it take some real blows this year, including from the FTX scandal, at the end of last year. Is there a use case here? Is this a valuable thing for our economy?
It's important to distinguish centralized financial intermediaries, whether they be crypto or other types of intermediaries, and the core of this technology, which is really based on peer-to-peer distributed technology that's not dependent on any one central party. And so I think we have to take that into account. Like many technologies, I think the proving out of what the most valuable use case is, it's going to take some time. But we can already see that having a way to transfer value, including over the internet, peer-to-peer, is a very valuable opportunity. And distributed ledger itself, I think, has proved to be valuable in different contexts as well. So we need to give the technology time, but I think there are people quietly working away on projects that will eventually show value. But again, moments like this also tell us you can't paint crypto with one brush. And if you're planning to invest in crypto assets, purchase crypto assets, you ought to think about what the underlying protocol is and whether it's one that you want to be part of or whether it's one that's just empty words and nothing behind it.
Does the FTX, and I think I can call it scandal at this point, does the FTX debacle change the SEC's approach, either in what you would be likely to do or how fast you'd be likely to do it? For example, could we expect some specific guidance on cryptocurrencies this year?
I've been asking for guidance, for us to put out guidance on crypto for many years now, and we haven't done it yet. And I think we've signaled a desire to take primarily an enforcement-based approach. But I hope that moments like this will tell us, it would be worth putting out some regulatory guidelines, whether that's in the form of guidance or in the form of rules, because when you have a clear framework, it's much easier to distinguish the good actors from the bad actors. And it makes it easier for a lawyer trying to give advice to a project that's really trying to do something useful and worthwhile if there are rules out there to point to.
So you've been asking for it for years. What's the impediment? I mean, what's the argument for the other side of not giving guidance?
I mean, the answer I keep getting is, well, the law is already clear, so what do we need to write special rules for? And my response is, when Congress wrote the securities laws, they were very prescient, and they said, we know you're going to need to make adjustments and exceptions for different types of assets and for different types of transactions. And so they gave us the authority to do that, and we just haven't used that authority, which is a shame.
I'd like to go to a very different neck of the woods, if you would. We're all watching. It's appalling what's going on in California right now, this torrential rain, which is doing so much damage. And there's so many reports that, in fact, the over $1 billion costs have been increasing as a climate. Let's talk about climate disclosure and the SEC's role in that. Where are we on that? Is it likely to happen? Are you likely to get sued if you try to do something?
Well, so right now we have a proposal that we put out that would apply to public companies that they would have to make certain disclosures and quite extensive disclosures around climate and weather-related events. We've gotten a lot of comments, a lot of public interest on that rulemaking, and so we're certainly reading those and working toward what I would imagine will be a final rule sometime in the coming months or years, or the chair drives the agenda, so I can't give the timing. But I will say that there's some really difficult problems that this climate disclosure rule puts forward. So, for example, while it applies to public companies on its face, it actually will have trickle-down effects on companies all through their supply chains. And so it will be very expensive for example, farmers and small businesses. And so we have a lot of different things we have to balance as we're thinking about how to draft a final rule.
Well, I must say, I hadn't thought about the trickle down, if you will, through the supply chain. At the same time, I assume there's no question about, at this point, that it's material. I mean, it clearly can affect a company and the shareholders of the company. Is there a lot of dispute over the methodology, exactly how you report climate risk?
Yeah, and let me just address the materiality point for a moment. Sort of as with crypto, Congress was really prescient, and they said, look, take a principles-based approach so that you can cover disclosure by lots of different companies and lots of different industries. And so for some companies, climate is certainly a material risk. If you've got a lot of operations in a place that is affected by these events, then that's maybe quite material. But in other instances, it may not be. And so we need to be careful not to write rules that require everyone to disclose risks that are not material to them. And so that's something that I worry about. Methodology is difficult because there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of coming up with some of these estimates around climate and making sure that they're specific enough to apply to a particular company. And so that is one of the areas where I think companies are trying to think about how they'll actually implement this if we put it in place. And we're trying to think about how we can put in a principles-based, I hope, a principles-based framework that will work across different kinds of companies.